Hello? Is something going on here?
Why don't you just die? Get off of me!
Chapter 1. I'd made my way to Starlight and had started getting myself set up. It had taken about a week of scrounging and sleeping in the old diner for me to find my first other human. He was called Carl, and at the time he was the only person I could trust in the Waste. He continues to be someone I can rely upon, even all these years later. He had been injured by a mutated bear. At the time, that's all I knew them as. It wasn't until Carl had healed up a little that he told me they were called Yaoguai. I remember I had to half carry, half drag him back to Starlight. He was a lot bigger and heavier than me, and I was fresh out the vault. Muscular degeneration had wasted what little muscle I had before being frozen. I did consider taking him back to Sanctuary for a moment, but I have more supplies at Starlight. I would have had to have gone back there, even if I had taken him to Sanctuary, just to get the supplies I needed to stitch up his leg and chest, and then he might have passed away waiting for me. I didn't know it at the time, but his chest wound looked a lot worse than what it was, and I managed to stitch it up and his leg with some ballistic fibre. It's not the most sanitary solution, but beggars can't really be choosers, and we didn't have many stim packs in those early days. I didn't even know if doctors had even survived the war. Thank God my mother had taught me how to fix my clothes as a child. At least I can do a decent running stitch. I'd gone to Concord to find out what had been going on. I could hear gunfire since I'd left the vault. Initially I tried to talk to a person that was there, but they attacked me, and I killed them. That's when a man on the balcony called to me.
In here. Man, I don't know who you are, but your timing's impeccable. Preston Garvey, Commonwealth Minuteman.
The man was desperate and must have seen me kill the woman. He asked me for my help. He wanted me to help clear out the museum so he could get some survivors to safety. He didn't give me any details about how many there were, and part of me wanted to run away. The idea of killing people that had done me no harm turned my stomach. Actively hunting down and killing people still turns my stomach, even to this day, and it's been many years since those early days. I worked my way through the museum, trying to fight back some old memories of being there with Nate when he and I were courting. After the fight, I returned to Starlight and buried myself in my room for 2 full days, as all the memories of what had happened hit me all over again. Carl looked after me and made sure that I ate at that time. He really was my rock. Anyway, I'd got through the museum, hiding and attacking people from behind. It wasn't the glorious single-person assault that you used to see in the movies, where bullets didn't seem to hurt and the gore was vibrant but clean. No, my single-person assault was messy, painful, and the gore was very real, dark and cloying. The sickly smell of it stuck in my throat and made me gag several times, but I had to press on. I had committed to helping these strangers, and that thought alone is what kept me moving forward through the carnage. It felt like an age at that time, but finally I found the survivors, and the man that had asked me for help introduced himself. He told me about the Minutemen and about the raiders that had attacked them. He was called Preston Garvey.
A month ago, there were 20 of us. Yesterday, there were 8. Now we're 5. It's just me, the Longs, Marcy and June. That's old Mama Murphy on the couch. And this here is Sturgis.
Hey.
Preston briefly introduced me to the other survivors from the Quincy massacre. The group of 5 were all hurting in one way or another, each with their own degrees of faith in the world. The Longs, Marcy and June, were the worst of the group. I found out later that they'd lost their son in the massacre. I knew their pain and could understand why their faith had been broken as thoroughly as it had, although June was the one that worried me more than Marcy. She was a hard woman, but she had to be. She was keeping June together. I think that without her forcing him to keep moving, to keep looking for somewhere safe, to keep living, I would have found 4 survivors instead of 5. I don't think anyone really thought about Marcy as the reason that June was still alive, besides Preston, myself, and the Longs themselves. As the settlement at Starlight grew, many people found her attitude distasteful, and there were many fights that broke out because of it. She did soften in the later years, but by that point, many people were already turned off by her. Mama Murphy was someone that I never really got to know before she was killed in a raider attack at Sanctuary. It was that attack that led the rest of the survivors to join me at Starlight, although the attack came a short while after they survived the siege in the museum. She was a strange woman. She claimed to be psychic, although I don't think I really bought into that. I came to regard her as a chem addict with some mild delusions, but she seemed harmless enough, and she gave me some hope on that first day. Sturgis was their mechanic and general handyman. He always struck me as a bit of an optimist, although he was also eminently practical. He was the one that helped me set up the radio beacon, and helped to design the market square, with the help of Carl and John. Later, Sardeliak joined his team, and between the 4 of them, even though Carl maintained his position among the guards, there was nothing they couldn't seem to do. He was the one that had come up with the plan to get out of the museum.
There's a crashed vertibird up on the roof. Old school. Pre-war. You might have seen it. Well, looks like one of its passengers left behind a seriously sweet goodie. We're talking a full suit of cherry T-45 power armor. Military issue.
Sturgis' plan seemed to be the best option any of us could come up with, and I already found a fusion core for the power armor, so I didn't need to backtrack through the museum, which I was very thankful for. I don't think I could have faced all those dead bodies again, especially without the adrenaline of a life and death situation pumping through my body. I made my way onto the roof and jumped into the power armor. A new wave of raiders had gathered outside, and I had to clear them before the group in the Museum of History could move to Sanctuary. It took a while for me to make my way down to the street, running from cover to cover as I tried to pick off each of them. Preston had taken up his position on the balcony again, giving me covering fire as I moved and helping me pick off each of the raiders as they attacked. As I got to the end of the street, I could hear something big moving around in the sewer below us. It crashed through and gave me the shock of my life. A massive lizard with claws as long as my arm. It was terrifying. Once the battle was over, I met up with Preston and the others in the museum's foyer. They were debating on what to do next, and Mama Murphy was still pushing to go to Sanctuary. Marcy had other ideas. They decided to go, and Preston asked me to join them after giving me some caps. I was glad that Carl had told me about the currency, because I'm sure I would have made a fool of myself when Preston gave them to me. Just before we set out to Sanctuary, me acting as another guard for the group, Mama Murphy turned to me and told me she sensed something. She gave me hope because I had not mentioned my son to this group, and yet she knew. She told me about him. It really did give me hope.
You are a woman out of time, out of hope. But all is not lost. I can feel your son's energy. He's alive.
Chapter 2. I spent a lot of my time scouring the ruins of the past, looking for things that could help Starlight or lead me closer to finding my son. I distinctly remember my first time finding Lexington. Before the war, it was a rather residential district with some shopping like the old Super Duper Mart, and at its core was the Corvega car factory. As I was exploring, I stumbled across some more raiders. I'd come to learn to shoot them on sight. And for the first time, I had seen raiders in power armor. I had to think fast. Nate had once told me that the cores were not shielded, so I snuck up behind them and targeted that. It worked.
Am I ever glad to see you. We could really use a hand.
You in some kind of trouble?
A pack of feral ghouls have holed up nearby, and some of them have started wandering out lately. If more of them start wandering out this way, we may be overrun. We need someone to clear them out.
Where are they holed up?
Here, I'll mark it for you. Thanks for your help. It means a lot to us.
A few days after scavenging, Carl came to me talking about ghouls. Initially I thought he meant ones like Jude. I quickly found out otherwise. He asked me to head to Bedford Station to make sure the ghouls don't range out and cause havoc for our provisioners, or for other settlers around. I had hoped to be able to reason with the ghouls, possibly even talk them into joining our settlement at Starlight. I didn't know how the world now worked. I didn't know of the monsters that hid in lonely places and could cause problems for the rest of us that wanted to be at least a little civilized. I didn't even think about agreeing with Carl and stopping the ghouls. I grabbed my satchel and headed off to the station. It was the first time since moving to Starlight that I really considered having people join in larger numbers. Maybe even set it up as somewhere where any weary traveller could settle down and make a life for themselves. Ever since I was a child, I wanted to help people. Strange that it took the world ending for me to really feel like I was able to do just that. I made my way to Bedford Station, sneaking as much as I could in the open areas, as I tried to avoid as many fights as I could. At one point I had to detour pretty far around as I saw a band of big green bastards, super mutants. That was the first that I had ever seen them. I heard them before I saw them. Their voices certainly carried out in the waste, and the howls of their dogs, which were green like themselves, big and muscled. Part of me was fascinated by them. They were so strange to me. I didn't tarry though. They had said something about finding food, and I didn't want to know what they meant by that. It's unfortunate that no one stays innocent in the Commonwealth. We all learn things that we would never have wanted to learn. One of those little bits of innocence that I lost was learning what super mutants ate. It was wise of me to avoid those super mutants on that first day. They were hunting humans for food, probably to drag back to some base or other to let fester in hanging bags. I had seen such places at Fallon's or Trinity Tower. The smell was unbearable. You could always smell a super mutant's base long before you see it. There's many such naiveties and innocences that you lose while living in the wastes. And there's also many things that you have to adjust to. The smell of the Commonwealth is something that took me months to get used to. It was dusty and mouldy, and there was always a tang in the air that had been carried on the wind up from the glowing sea. Not that I knew anything about the irradiated wasteland to the far south at that point. I couldn't even comprehend something that desolate. The Commonwealth itself always seemed desolate to me, but in comparison, the Commonwealth is bustling with life. I could never get used to the killing that happened in the Commonwealth. Not just by my hand, but by others as well. We had certainly degenerated back to a much more wild western state. The rule of law was a bullet from almost any infraction, and for those places that did try to have some law, it wasn't overly just. Before the war, I trained to be a lawyer. My training was of no help to me, and even though I tried to bring the rule of law back to Starlight Driving, there were still those times where the law of the gun outweighed my attempts to bring law back to the Commonwealth. Once I had circled wide of the super mutants, I continued on making my way to Bedford. I had hoped I could reason with the ghouls there. I had never seen a feral before. No one, not even Jude, had told me about the degeneration of the brain that can happen with ghouls. Although I guess I understand why Jude didn't. If I was faced with that kind of potential future, I'm not sure I would want to dwell on it either. And Jude, she never really thought too hard on the future. Any day she went without being hungry and had good company to share stories with, she was happy. It took most of the day, much longer than before the war, for me to get to Bedford Station, and there, I finally understood why these ghouls were a problem, and that I wouldn't be able to reason with them. They had all lost their minds. The radiation had destroyed them. Pity guided me and I fought them. I wanted to put them out of their misery.
What do you want? We don't need any more trouble around here.
Take it easy. I'm with the Minutemen.
You're with the Minutemen? I didn't really think you fellas still existed. We sent word with one of them passing traders, but honestly, I never expected anything to come of it. Most people don't put much stock in the Minutemen these days after Quincy. Bad business, that.
Is there something you need my help with?
Whew. Yeah, I'm damn glad you're here. There's a raider gang that's been giving us trouble for weeks. Stealing food and supplies, threatening to kill us all if we don't pony up. We know where they're coming from, but we can't go up against a gang like that.
Don't worry. I'll take care of those raiders for you.
Thanks, friend. If you folks are for real this time, it'll be a welcome change for the better.
It wasn't that far from Bedford Station to 10 Pines Bluff, which is somewhere that Preston had told me about. He had heard that they had had some troubles lately and had requested me to find out what the problem was. I was more than happy to stop there on my way through, and it was getting dark. I never really been one for camping outside, and in this new world that I had been thrust into, I'm sure I wouldn't have gotten a moment's rest, and had remained fearful of every noise in the dark of the night. I made my way along the train tracks and came upon 10 Pines shortly before the sun dipped below the horizon, and was greeted by a rather suspicious young woman. She came at me with her gun drawn, and I almost went for my machete, the weapon I felt most comfortable using. Nate had taught me how to fire and maintain a gun before the war, but I was never really all that good with it, and even at short range, well, if you're fast enough, you can take down an enemy before they're able to fire. I have always been much more visceral in combat anyway. After speaking with the woman, I later found out her name was Sushi, although I can't for the life of me think of how she got a name like that. When I first heard it, I actually laughed. It's hard to believe she even knows what a fish is, let alone know about Japanese food. I stayed at 10 Pines, speaking with Sushi and her brother Harry about what's been going on. They mostly spoke about the raiders in Lexington and Corvega. It wasn't a place I had looked forward to returning to, since I had seen the raiders in power armor. Even today they worry me. That power armor makes using melee weapons almost pointless, unless you have something that can puncture the metal and is long enough to cut through the body beneath. It was strange, but even with the impending doom of being attacked from raiders, or going to attack raiders, the night passed with a kind of serenity that is rare in the Commonwealth. Once Sushi had found out who I was with, she warmed up to me, and the farm she and Harry ran had a kind of no-stress atmosphere to it. The pair seemed to take each day as they came. They didn't make too many plans for the future and instead allowed the world to carry on around them. There was a simplicity that was very attractive to their way of thinking and living. They did talk about wanting to fix up the old house that was at the end of the farm, maybe turn it into a storeroom for their tools, or another room so the two weren't sleeping in the small shack on the bluff. Although neither of them seemed overly bothered about sharing a home, they did say that it could get a little interesting if either of them had a partner over. Sushi laughed about that being the reason there was a spare bed in the old house. Whomever didn't have a guest would sleep in the other end of the settlement. She may have laughed about it, but I'm pretty sure she was being serious when she said one of them was kicked out of their home for the night. That night I slept in the spare bed, looking up at the stars and contemplating the changes in my life. On cold nights, like that one, it was easy to feel sorry for myself, but then I thought on everything that I had accomplished and the friends I had made along the way. It sounds very cliched, but it was true. There was much for me to feel happy about, and the calm atmosphere of that farm. I wasn't able to feel anything but a warm happiness, even with everything that's gone wrong. 10 Pines Bluff was the place that I found myself at many times in the coming years. I could never forget the feeling I got from the two siblings, and it was hard for me to stay away. I would turn up, usually unannounced, and they always had a place for me. Sometimes I would arrive with someone like Sturgis or John, rarely with Carl, and we would work on improving their home. We built Sushi her own home, Harry opting to stay in the old house out of a sense of pride, he having built it in the first place. We built up some defences and repaired the old house, which became my home away from home, They even put in an extra bed for when I brought someone over with me. Soon, Ten Pines was drawing people to them as well. They became a small, thriving village that managed to grow enough food to sell some. Harry became a regular trader at Starlight, often bringing in the produce that they'd grown. The next day I walked back to Starlight to resupply and to report the problem back to Preston. He and I spoke for a couple of hours about the best course of action in assaulting the factory. He sent a call out to other Minutemen on the off chance that there might be someone out there, and much to our surprise, there was some Minutemen still around. 4 showed up to help my assault, and one of them knew a back way into Corvega. We spent the day in the barracks talking about what we need and how many raiders there was likely to be on the inside, the best way to assault the place, and anything else we could think of. We geared up to set out early the next day. And what we didn't know until early next morning was that the Lexington Raiders, they were coming to meet us.
Think you get high? Shit!
Hello everyone, I'm Sushikat and I hope you've all had a fantastic day. Unfortunately, I lost about 4 hours of recording, so I can't show you what happened during week 4 and the building, so instead I've jumped straight into the tour. I wanted to spend this time to say thank you to Loco4Pack for giving this challenge and to explain some of the ideas that I think worked well and have not worked so well with my builds and videos. A lot of people seem to have really enjoyed my typewriter style of storytelling in the videos, and I have to credit JPIC with inspiring the idea, as when I saw his holotape form of storytelling, I really wanted to do something similar, but there was no way I was going to be able to work out how he did the holotape thing. So I settled for something a little less technical, hence using the typewriter. I really like using Under the Wing and utilising the space, and I initially had the idea for my first week update, but I didn't think it would be something that would be done by someone on their own. They'd be much more likely to utilise a pre-built building, so week 1 she stayed in the diner, and week 2 she moved into the space under the wing. I really like how Jude's house came out. It feels pretty light and airy, although I have noted that the building is going to have to be moved if I keep the farm where it is, because as the settlement grows, the farm is also going to have to grow, and there's not much space for that at the moment. And it wouldn't make too much sense to pull up some of the plants that give food to plant others. I've tried to bring some characterization for Jude into her home, although I don't know if she's a smoker, and I've used some knowledge that she gave me to further decorate her home, for instance the combat helmet beside her bed. I really like the idea of having a scrapping area and have seen a couple that look really good in this challenge. One of the ones that I like the best is Sardeliac's one, and I wanted to put a scrapping area into my settlement as well. I thought about having it closer, but it seems to be something that would be noisy and messy, so I pushed it to the far side of the settlement and put Sturgis and John out here, so they were close to their place of work. I did forget to decorate up their home, however. I should have that done for the next update. Planning is usually a good idea, especially when it comes to your perks. I got to level 14 for the week 4 update and then realised I'd not taken medic as a perk, so instead I built myself a diner and had Jude assigned to it. I wanted to start getting at least a little money in and to start properly characterising some of the characters and give them some of their own personality beyond guard or farmer. I enclosed the guards off as I thought it would look better not to have wide spaces with guard posts in them. It also allows the guards to do whatever they need without being bothered by the other settlers. I'm going to have the guard posts incorporated into an entrance area, and this should keep it from being a standalone structure further along in the build. I'll also be removing Carl's shack at some point because I want all the guards in the same place, so the area where his shack is will at some point be repurposed. I've also had a couple comments saying that they like my fire pit outside the guard barracks. I first saw this done in Loco4Pack's video at, I believe, 10 Pines Bluff, although I'm sure he'll let me know if he's done it before then. As for the guards, I've got John's son, not named yet, Preston and June all up front so Preston can keep an eye on the other two, and Carl is on top of the screen because he's capable of working without supervision. I wanted to build the barracks where all of the guards will be able to come back after their shift, where they can hang out or sleep, and as such this barracks will probably develop into something a bit more expansive later on. Right now it just holds 2 guards. I'm looking at having it hold a lot more. Finally, I want to include some settlers for each of the entrants into the challenge. As such, if you have joined the challenge and want a specific settler, please let me know in the comments. I have been Sushikat, and I hope you've all had a fantastic day or night. Bye!